Everyone has been debating the debates, and not just the content, but also the structure. Many Republicans said last week's CNBC's debate was filled with gotcha questions, and now they've suspended NBC's February debate. Here to talk with me about that and more is Sean Spicer, the party's communications director and chief strategist. Sean, thanks so much for talking to us.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Jorge.
So, you know, words are important, and when the RNC announced that the NBC debate was going to be suspended, you didn't say canceled. So does that mean that you are still negotiating with NBC for the debate?
It does, and I think your point is well taken. That it wasn't a cancellation, it was a suspension. When the candidates went into the CNBC debate, Jorge, they had been told a series of things that would and wouldn't happen. A lot of those things didn't occur or did occur that weren't supposed to, and I think we need to, as a party, on behalf of our candidates, slow down the train a little, if you will, and say that before we continue with another NBC property, that we need to have certain assurances for our candidates that the debate is going to be handled in a respectful way, that the format that they propose is one that we're assured is going to be carried through.
Okay, so I understand with NBC, negotiations are underway. Let me ask you a question about our colleagues at Telemundo. Don't you think they should have the right to still be participants in a debate? As you know, the Republicans, that's the only debate they'll have with the Spanish language media since Univision was not allowed to host one. So is the Telemundo debate still on?
Well, I think it's part of the larger discussion, but obviously we understand the importance of reaching out to the Hispanic media, why I'm having this conversation with you on Univision and why other folks speak with you and others there at your property who talk to CNN Espanol, who talk to Telemundo, who talk to FA. I mean, there's a lot of Spanish language media, both print, radio, television. We understand the importance of that in the Hispanic community, and we're going to ensure that that message gets out and those mediums are used.
All right, let me ask you about President Barack Obama. I'm sure you've heard this, but he said that the Republican candidates couldn't handle the CNBC moderators. Let's listen to what he said.
Have you noticed that every one of these candidates say, Obama's weak, and then it turns out they can't handle a bunch of CNBC moderators?
So here's President Barack Obama. Sean, your response.
Well, I think that's silly. There's no one, look, I think our candidates did a phenomenal job at that debate. They went out, they spoke about their vision, their solutions to America, despite silly questions. But it's not a question about handling debates or taking tough questions. It's a question about a stupid question. And I think a lot of questions were stupid. Right off the bat, they're asking Donald Trump if he compares himself to a comic book character. That's just stupid. That's not a gotcha question. That's not a tough question. I think he handled it well. I think Mike Huckabee handled his questions well. I think all of them did. But it's not a question of handling it well or responding it or complaining. It's a question of the debate was supposed to be about issues of finance, about the economy, and it wasn't. There wasn't a single question, for example, asked about trade. We've got a major trade agreement coming up down into Congress. Not one. You would think that that would have been important. Tax reform, handling the budget crisis, long-term debt. Those are all issues that I think when you say that you're going to have a debate about the economy, about finances, that people expected. When it turns out that they want to ask a silly series of questions, there's rightfully some concern that people didn't keep their word.
Now, as you know, Ted Cruz suggested that only journalists who have voted for the Republican Party in the past should be allowed as moderators. Do you agree with him?
Well, I think he's got a point. I'm not sure I'd go as far as he did in saying that every one of them. But I think that what we've tried to do at the RNC for the first time ever was add an element of conservatism into each of these debates. So you saw, for example, Hugh Hewitt at the CNN debate, and there's going to be an element in each one of these debates going forward. But I think for a lot of us on the Republican side, a lot of us in the conservative movement, we've seen journalist after journalist who has spent their entire life in Democratic politics or advocating for liberal causes, suddenly behind a moderator desk and saying, well, now I'm suddenly objective and fair. And the fact of the matter is that the Republican primary is about Republican voters and Republican activists having an opportunity to elect the Republican nominee.
So you want to see moderators who are Republicans? Is that the point?
No, I don't think. I think what I would argue is that there has to be an element, more of an element of conservative media. Maybe we have a couple debates on mainstream media and a couple with conservative media, but I think at some point that moderators who understand what grassroots Republican conservative activists are thinking and care about get to actually ask some of the questions.
Sean, are you concerned that Republicans might lose the Hispanic vote again? Your candidates are not reflecting what the majority of Republicans want. These are the numbers that I have. 56% of Republicans favor a path to legal status when it comes to immigration, according to Pew Research Center. But most of your candidates don't. So how are you going to win the Hispanic vote that way?
Well, I think part of this is and I don't mean to minimize it, but I think what we've championed here at the RNC is showing up. I think too often our party, whether it's the Hispanic vote or the black vote or the Asian vote, frankly, we've sort of sat back. And for example, we've even taken to some degree the evangelical vote for granted. And I think that what we need to do is we need to start showing up more places, talking to them about our values, talking about education reform, our plans for health care reform, tackling long-term debt, helping to create jobs, what we're doing to create job stability. Those are the kind of things that I think are on the hearts and minds of voters. I think that we can definitely do a lot better. But part of it, Jorge, is that a lot of our guys on the presidential level in the past, frankly, haven't gone out and sought that vote. When you saw a guy like George W. Bush, I think he did very well with the Hispanic community because he felt comfortable with the Hispanic community. He went to their businesses, he went to the churches, he went to the festivals, he engaged with them and showed that he cared about what was important to them. But if you allow me, when you look back at last cycle, people like Cory Gardner in Colorado, who took 40% of the Hispanic vote, Governor Greg Abbott in Texas, who took about 40% of the Hispanic vote. These aren't folks that went soft on immigration. They were very hard on immigration, but they went in, they talked about economic issues, they respected the Hispanic community, they went to their places of business, to their places of worship, into their homes, and talked about bringing them into the process and welcoming their concerns, and it worked.
Sean, as you know, Democrats have been criticized for not putting forward more Latinos or African Americans or Asians as candidates. The GOP has 2 Latinos, 1 African American, and 3 sons of immigrants as candidates. Is this your strategy to try to win the minority vote then?
No, because I don't think that, frankly, I think that just because you're Hispanic, you're going to get a ton of Hispanic votes. If you're black, you're not going to get a ton of black votes. If you're a woman, you're not going to get the female vote. I think that's looking at the electorate in a very monolithic way. And so I think that no matter who you are, you have to go out and earn the vote of individual voters and individual constituencies. So, for example, I think that just because you're white doesn't mean you can't do well in the Hispanic community. But I do think, to your point, when you look at the 2 teams running for president, you've got, a crazy old white man leading a lot of polls on the Democratic side. When you look at the diversity on the Republican side, you've got Hispanics, you've got an African-American doctor, you've got the first female Fortune 20 CEO, you've got a top businessman, you've got, we've got the diversity on our side, the youth, the energy. So I actually find it very fascinating when we compare the 2 sides, because when you look at what we've put up versus what they've put up, I think both the qualifications and the diversity is on the Republican side.
And just finally, let me give the final word to Donald Trump. Today he said that those candidates who don't even have 3% in the polls should leave the race. This is what he said.
Do I think that it's time for some of the other Republicans in the race that are registering 0? In a couple of cases, they have 0 with an arrow pointing left, which I assume is a mistake. Do I think it's time to have some of the other Republican candidates drop out? Yes. There are too many people.
Donald Trump. Sean, do you agree with him?
No, I think that every candidate needs to run their own race. You look at a guy like Rick Santorum last cycle, who didn't have a ton of money, but he worked really hard. He went to all 99 counties in Iowa. He won the state. Then he went on an 11-state swing later in the cycle. I'm not here to tell any candidate what they should or shouldn't do. They need to compose a strategy that's right in their own belief, put together the resources necessary to implement that strategy, and then stay in the race as long as they particularly see fit.
Sean, thanks so much for talking to us, and hope to see you soon in Miami.
I hope to get down there, too. I'm jealous of you right now.